Okay? Welcome. Thank you for coming to this memorial tribute to Madalyn O'Hair, Jon Garth Murray, and Robin Murray O'Hair. We have a sign-in book for this occasion, so if you haven't signed in, would you please do so, and feel free to write any thoughts you want to put down if you so desire. This event is being taped for posterity. We are assembled at the Orlando Airport Marriott Hotel on the evening of April 12, 2001. My name is Ellen Johnson, and I am the president of American Atheists. For this memorial, I would like to begin showing a videotape of Madalyn O'Hair speaking in, I think it's 1990, is that what it is, Joe? At our convention in Florida, because there are many of you who haven't even heard her voice in too many years. I would then like to recount for you all the accomplishments and contributions the three of them have made to our organization, to the promotion of the philosophy of atheism, and the defense of the Establishment Clause of the First Amendment. We will then begin our personal remembrances and appreciations, interspersed with some music and more film footage, as well as some reading of poetry written by Robin Murray O'Hair. I want to respectfully ask that you do not spend this time, which is for and about the Murray O'Hairs, those of you who will be coming up to talk, please do not spend this time on any talk of the criminals involved in their murder. This time is not for them. And please try to keep your remarks under 5 minutes. Joe?
In all of those cities, everywhere, an equal opportunity to distort and misrepresent everything that I had to say. That is the history of the Association of American Atheists Encounters with the Medium. This year, C-SPAN is taking this speech to be released nationally later. For the first time in the...
That was wonderful. That was so good. I can't get enough of her. I hope you're all going to eat the food. I'm not going to let you out of here if there's food left. So please, there's plenty of food. There should be plenty of food left. Well, let's continue on with our memorial tribute. I hope you will indulge me and let me say a few words first, and then I would like to recite to you, as I said, all of the accomplishments of the Murray O'Hair family. And then I'll start calling you up, those of you who have contacted me and said that you would like to say a few words. And then I'll show a little footage, not an hour, a little footage of Jon Murray. We'll do some more tributes, and then we'll show some footage of Robin Murray O'Hair as well. You ready, Ron? I would like to borrow the words of Joseph Lewis, who said these words to eulogize another freethinker, but I don't think that he or the Murray O'Hairs would mind if I used these same words for my friends. For they convey my thoughts so well, and I think you will agree with me that they describe our friends so perfectly. Madalyn, Jon, and Robin defied the ignorant, bigoted, fanatical world of religion. They asked no favors and gave no quarter. They spoke the truth, the plain, unvarnished truth. They were unafraid. They stood foursquare. They never hesitated. They never retreated. They cared not about the feelings of ignorance when the truth was necessary. They struck with all the power at their command and never once restrained their indictment or failed to denounce the liars and hypocrites of their day, regardless of their so-called respectability. They threw his shining lance full and fair into the forehead of their defamers and minced not a word or held back not a single thought when in combat. Only the three, with the magnificent courage of truly and supremely great people, could have carried on such a crusade for intellectual emancipation against such overwhelming odds. They had wholeheartedly dedicated their lives to this great cause, and nothing on earth could deter them. Robert Ingersoll once said, "Nothing is greater than to break the chains from the bodies of men, nothing nobler than to destroy the phantoms of the soul." To this they dedicated their lives, with a determination that made all other considerations insignificant and valueless. They were as free from prejudice as the mariner's compass, desiring only to find amid the mists and clouds of ignorance the star of truth. When the world realized the danger that these noble persons posed, they marshaled their heaviest artillery against them. With an outpouring of the knowledge of the universe and the laws which operate with undeviating accuracy, with unanswerable logic, with more understanding of the Bible than their clerical opponents, and with an eloquence without parallel, the Murray O'Hair's adversaries were left upon the field of battle, mortally wounded. The only audible sounds were their dying sighs. The founder of American Atheists, Madalyn O'Hair, her son Jon Garth Murray, and adopted granddaughter Robin Murray O'Hair have been the authors and architects of modern American atheism, which has come into prominence in the last 35 years. Yet it is almost impossible to know exactly what the Murray O'Hairs accomplished during all those years if you rely only on what the media printed. There has been such a lack of information and so much disinformation out there that it is time to set the record straight. So I am going to do it. Bear with me, because the Murray O'Hairs accomplished a lot. Madalyn O'Hair founded the first American Atheist Library and Archives to collect, preserve, and utilize atheist history and publications. This library is internationally known, with an extraordinary collection currently valued at $3 million. She founded the American Atheist Radio Series in 1980. As the first and only regularly scheduled atheist broadcasts ever to be made in the United States, and broadcast over 123 stations for a dozen years. She also founded the American Atheist Forum in 1980, the first and only regularly scheduled television broadcast ever to be produced, directed, and broadcast by atheists. It was on the air for about 16 years and aired on 130 major cities, reaching an estimated 9.3 million homes. She founded the first local-level network of atheist chapters ever established in the United States. She worked with one of our early chapter directors, a prominent businessman, Lloyd Thorin, who is now deceased, so that he could found the first American Atheist Museum in the United States in Indiana. Later, she worked with Lloyd, who owned several telephone companies, to establish the first Dial an Atheist service. Madalyn O'Hair founded the United World Atheists, which banded together atheist groups throughout the world and invited a major atheist leader to speak at the annual national conventions. Together with Gora, a compatriot of Gandhi, she founded the system of World Atheist Meets. She founded the American Atheist Press, which publishes atheist books. In 1987, the press obtained press credentials for covering both the Democratic and the Republican national conventions. She founded the American Atheist Magazine, the first openly outright atheist journal which has been published for about 30 years now. She founded the American Atheist International Radio Forum, which was heard on 2,000 radio stations worldwide. She also began the first production of audio and video cassettes of atheist materials ever produced in the world. She originated the American Atheist Annual Conventions, of which there have been 26. She was the first person to ever propose that the United States and all the governments of the world recognize as celebration days the 4 days of natural events which affect the world. The vernal equinox, which is the beginning of spring, the summer solstice, the beginning of summer, the autumnal equinox, the beginning of autumn, and the winter solstice, the beginning of winter. She founded the first atheist center in the world. The second was founded in India by Gora. Madalyn O'Hair, Jon Murray, and Bill Talley of Colorado, Bill Talley is now deceased, established an American Atheist Alcohol Recovery Group, which was able to have the Veterans Administration rule that veterans in veterans hospitals must be provided secular services as an alternative to the Christian Alcoholics Anonymous and Palmer drug abuse methods. Madalyn O'Hair and Jon Murray worked with Arnold Via of Virginia to create the first atheist cemetery in the United States. It is no longer in existence, though. Madalyn O'Hair and Jon Murray worked with They worked with a former Texas chapter director to begin a 1-hour, once-a-week serial program, The Atheist Hour, on the Pacifica station in Houston, which ran consistently for over 9 years. They assisted in the creation of a similar program in New York City. They worked with a number of leaders in the gay movement to assist them to set up the first Gay Atheist League of America, and later a separate national American Gay Atheist organization. American atheists opened the first full-fledged all-atheist bookstore in the United States in Denver, Colorado, and the second in Austin, Texas. Madalyn O'Hair was able to obtain a ruling from the Veterans Administration to add to the grave markers in veteran cemeteries the symbol of American atheism. The Murray O'Hairs and American atheists organized and carried out the first atheist picketing of any pope in the Western Hemisphere in Chicago, Illinois, in 1979. They organized and carried out the first atheist picketing of the White House in Washington, D.C. in 1982. Madalyn O'Hair was arrested and jailed in November 1977 for objecting to prayers at a city council meeting, and Robin Murray O'Hair was arrested and jailed in December 1988 rather than take an oath, so help me God, in order to serve as a juror. Madalyn O'Hair and Jon Murray have been the atheist leaders who have filed literally scores of state-church separation cases in city, county, state, and federal courts throughout the land over a period of 30 years. The most notable case, of course, is Murray versus Curlett. Another notable case, O'Hair v. Payne in 1969, by the publicity it aroused, caused the United States government to abandon its plans to carry religious programming into space in U.S. NASA operations. This was the Apollo 7 mission, which was sent to circle the moon and look for a landing site and take photographs. This mission was codenamed Experiment P-1, and the astronauts were given a military order to have a spontaneous manifestation of religious awe. At 7:31 p.m., plus 10 seconds, when they came out from around the back of the moon and saw the planet Earth. They were then ordered to recite from memory the first 10 verses of Genesis, which were conveniently printed into the flight plan. The purpose of all that was, of course, to show the communists that at that time that the good Christian United States would be better at space flight than the atheistic and communist government of the old Soviet Union. In 1977, the nation-rocking case to remove "In God We Trust" from currency and coins was filed by American atheists, titled O'Hair v. Blumenthal. In ruling against O'Hair, U.S. District Judge Jack Roberts agreed with a federal appeals court which said that the use of the motto on coins, quote, has nothing to do with the establishment of religion, end quote. The United States Supreme Court refused to review the case on appeal. In another case, O'Hair v. Wotoya, Madalyn, John, and American atheists challenged the right of Pope John Paul II to give a full Roman Catholic Mass on the Washington Mall in the District of Columbia in 1979. Murray v. Goldstein attempted to stop the tax exemptions of church businesses. O'Hair v. Briscoe attempted to remove a creche from the rotunda of the Texas Capitol building. O'Hair v. Hill fought the exclusion of atheists from public office. Collins v. Chandler attempted to stop prayers at high school commencement exercises. Reed v. Ingham County was fought over the firing of a policeman in Michigan because he was an atheist. O'Hair v. Nixon attempted to stop full-scale church services in the White House. Murray versus 27 radio stations and Society of Separationists, Inc. versus the FCC both concerned the demand for equal time for atheists under the Fairness Doctrine. Madalyn O'Hair appeared on almost every major television and radio talk show in the United States, and she wrote dozens of books, booklets, pamphlets, magazine articles, etc., all on atheism and state-church separation. If it is tiring to hear this long list of accomplishments, and it is by no means complete, imagine what life was like for the Murray O'Hairs for over 30 years. You won't hear about these accomplishments from the press. Of the three family members whom many of us knew and admired, Madalyn O'Hair was the one given the most attention by the media. Her son John and adopted granddaughter Robin devoted their entire adult lives to the cause and the organization their mother and grandmother also gave her life to. All three made their mark on atheist history with their impressive contributions and years of dedication to the cause. And in a bit, we'll show some film footage of John and Robin. But now I'd like to give you all a chance to say a few words. Henry Morgan, would you like to come up? Are you here, Henry? He's probably outside. Noel Scott? Henry, you're there? Okay, Henry's coming up.
All of you who know me, I'm a man of few words, so I won't be boring you with a long speech. I met the O'Hairs first in 1975 at the old Kaiser Broadcasting Station in Southfield, Michigan. And I joined the organization about 5 years earlier. And it was my great honor and privilege to serve with and know the Murray O'Hair family. Thank you.
Thank you, Henry. A lot of people couldn't be here, but they sent a few words written down for me to read on their behalf. This is from Scott Schutzman, who was the attorney for the Murray O'Hairs in the Truth Seeker case. And he wrote, "I remember when I first began working on the Truth Seeker case. Madalyn called me up one day and said, 'Schutzman, Moses and the Ten Commandments are on the United States Supreme Court building. We need to take them down.' I responded, 'Madalyn, I am Jewish, you know.' Madalyn said, 'You won't take them down?' I said, 'No, I won't do it on a contingency fee basis.' I remember Madalyn laughing so hard on the other end of the phone. Soon after this incident, Madalyn and I became friends. Because of the case I was handling, I traveled to Austin about 3 times, and Madalyn, John, and Robin visited California twice. I would have to say that I never enjoyed a client's company more than Madalyn's. She spoke with intelligence, biting wit, terse honesty, and had a sense of humor you rarely see from stand-up comedians. I will miss Madalyn O'Hair very much." Noel Scott, would you like to come up and say a few words?
Well, let me start out by reminding everybody that tomorrow would have been Madalyn's birthday. And the last time April 13th fell on a Friday was also, by coincidence, a convention. In fact, that's what we just saw. The speech was at that convention. That was the only time I ever saw Madalyn. Actually on her birthday. I first met Madalyn in 1980 when it was arranged by a mutual friend of ours for her and Robin to spend the night at my house in Washington. I remember I was very apprehensive about it. I had seen her image on television for a very long time, and sometimes she came off very formidably. I frankly thought that I was frankly afraid that she might turn out to be some kind of complaining old battle axe, you know, and judging from what the way she came out on television, but. I turned out to be very wrong about that. Apparently she just came out on television that way sometimes simply because she did not suffer fools gladly. It turned out that she and her entire family are all very gracious people. She was a perfectly, for those of you who never met her, I guess there's quite a few of you here, she and all 3 of them were very charming, gracious people. There's nothing to be afraid of from anything to be afraid of at all from any of them, and they would do anything to help anyone in trouble. When she was at my house, I remember I had remembered her saying in her book, An Atheist Epic, that she had once been a piano teacher. So I sat down on the piano, played a little bit in hopes of getting her to play, so I could then brag to everybody that Madalyn Murray O'Hair once played on this piano. But she had to decline because it turns out, I didn't know, one of her hands, I forget now which one it was partially paralyzed. because of a beating that she got at the hands of loving Christians at one time. Another thing I remember about that visit was that she liked coffee with a lot of cream and no sugar. That's one of those little things that you like to know about great people. One thing I did for them was I went to overseas with them in 1989 and 1990 to help them run their exhibits at the book fairs in Moscow and in Frankfurt, Germany. I like to say that I'm probably the only person who ever went through Lenin's tomb with Madalyn and her family. They were, yeah, am I, okay. I remember at that fair in Moscow, the representatives from the religious publishers would come over and harass us. You know, Jon Murray remarked, you know, here we are over halfway around the world, and we still can't get away from these people. They would come over. I remember one fellow among them that claimed to be an atheist. Some well-dressed young man came up. Well, I'm an atheist, and you don't speak for me. And Madalyn said, well, glad to hear it, Sonny. I think everybody should think for themselves. At another time, some of them were asking. Some of these representatives of these publishers were asking, what about her older son Bill, who had converted to Christianity? And she started talking about how Bill had not really converted, that he was sending a lot of money to her to help represent the organization, and they kind of stood there. These people kind of stood there with astonished looks on their face, you know, and just slowly walked away. And I was sitting right beside her, and I had a similar look. I didn't know what was going on. But she suddenly turned to me with a great big smile on her face and said, I just love to lie to these people. Well, I think my 5 minutes are up. I just want to fast forward to this year. I don't know whether anybody besides me noticed this or not, but shortly when W. Bush came out with his executive orders, trying to give all our money to faith-based organizations. This was very shortly after the remains of the Murray O'Hair family were found. And maybe this was a coincidence, but maybe he really thought that now that it was confirmed that Madalyn was gone, that it would now be open religious season on this great country of ours. And I would like to end by saying that we can best honor the memory of this remarkable family by making sure that does not happen. We must not let this country become a theocracy. Thank you.
Thank you, Noel. That was lovely. We realize that some of you can't hear very well, so we have to get the house. It's the house system. We can't adjust that, so we'll see what we can do about it. So maybe if you talk louder into the mic, it will help. I would like to read another tribute sent by somebody who couldn't be here, Dr. Albert Ellis. Some of you might remember Dr. Ellis from the Institute for Rational Emotive Therapy, and he spoke at a convention. If you ever heard him speak, you'll never forget him. But he sent the following. Madalyn O'Hair, along with John and Robin, were unusually courageous individuals. Madalyn especially thought for herself and braved the profound disagreements and dissents of many people, and John and Robin followed her beautifully in these respects. I knew all of them for many years, and I especially found that Madalyn subscribed strongly to some of the principles of rational emotive behavior therapy and promoted them in her talks and recordings. She particularly agreed with me that people largely upset themselves about the things that happen to them and do not merely get upset by the unfortunate events that commonly occur in their lives and in the world. So she used some of the principles of rational emotive behavioral therapy to take the almost insane opposition of many other people to stubbornly refuse to upset herself about it. She was a notable modern philosopher as well as, of course, a humanitarian activist. She also helped teach to others the REBT view of unconditional self-acceptance. Subscribing to this view, you always accept yourself, in spite of your flaws and failings, just because you are human, and you rate and measure only your thoughts, feelings, and actions as good and useful or as dysfunctional and useless. But you do not globally rate yourself, your entire being, in any manner. Madalyn, along with Jon and Robin, was remarkably adept at achieving USA, unconditional self-acceptance, as well as giving unconditional other acceptance to all others. Her example for the rest of us fallible humans was and will remain profound. Cordially regards, Albert Ellis, President. Dick Hogan, would you like to come up and say a few words?
I don't have a whole lot to say. Kind of like Henry, I first met Madalyn in '72 at the convention. I believe it was '72 in Dallas. I didn't join until somewhere at the time of the late '80s. But my experiences with, most of my experiences with Jon, he was a beer drinker. And I guess that's where I came into play, because I'm a beer drinker too. And we used to sit, drink a few beers and tell some stories. Some of his stories, of course, were sort of laid back, because I don't think he had a whole lot of life of his own except for that organization. Madalyn, on the other hand, was just as plain and just as, the side of her that I remember and can think about is the affection that she had for Robin and Jon, and just plain people, just people this, just trying to get along and just trying to be what they were. She had a cause, and her cause is probably the premier factor in her life and the way she lived it. But nevertheless, when you saw them together and you were able to talk to them on that standpoint, they were just plain people. That's what I can't get across to other people, and that's what I would like for people to remember the O'Hairs as. It's just a good bunch of people that cared for everything, just like you and I. But anyway, that's all I had to say. In fact, I wasn't even going to get up here to say it.
I'd like to read another tribute from Craig Etter. For those of you who do not know me, I am a lawyer and former IRS trial attorney. Approximately 2 years after leaving the IRS and entering into the private practice of law, I had one of the most unique and rewarding experiences of my career, having the opportunity to provide legal counsel to Madalyn Murray O'Hair. It was in the spring of 1991. I received a telephone call from Madalyn Murray O'Hair requesting that I represent her, Jon Murray, Robin Murray O'Hair, and all of the atheist organizations founded by Madalyn. At the time, the IRS was auditing the tax returns of these individuals and the atheist organizations for every open tax year with respect to which the IRS could audit. It was in the midst of these acrimonious tax audits and later other legal battles that I grew to respect and admire Madalyn as a person and as the champion of the atheist cause. In reflecting on my experiences with Madalyn, several words come to mind that describe this unusual person. Does it sound louder when I talk into this mic? Yeah, that's it. Talk into the right-hand mic. And reflecting on my experiences with Madalyn, they are courageous, principled, determined, and honest. Throughout the years, Madalyn courageously fought for her belief in the separation of church and state. Despite attacks from religious sects, governmental entities as strong and powerful as the IRS, as well as attacks by her husband, Richard O'Hair, and her son, William Murray, Madalyn encountered every obstacle with firmness and fearlessness. Madalyn was never the type of person who would ever run from an adversary. As she often said when she met an obstacle, just deal with it. Madalyn was principled. Regardless of the personal or financial costs, Madalyn never strayed from her convictions. When most people use the phrase, "It's not the money, it's the principle," they usually mean just the opposite, but not Madalyn. To Madalyn, it was always the principle. It is this quality that made her the preeminent atheist in the world. She was determined, starting with the landmark case that ended with the 1963 U.S. Supreme Court decision banning prayer in public schools. Madalyn dedicated her life to the ongoing struggle for the survival of atheism and its reality. In the late 1960s, Madalyn moved her family to Austin, Texas, the heart of the Bible Belt, to continue the battle. Madalyn founded 6 atheist organizations, one of which, the Charles E. Stevens American Atheist Library and Archives, became the owner of the largest collection of atheist books and materials in the world. Notwithstanding attacks on these organizations over the years, Madalyn dedicated her energies to their survival. It was through her determination that these organizations still exist today. Finally, Madalyn was honest. I do not recall one instance in which Madalyn told me anything but the truth, even where the truth hurt our position in court. Even when the truth hurt our position in court, Madalyn still marched forward with the truth. Despite my religious background and beliefs, I am proud to have had the opportunity to know and represent this truly extraordinary individual, Madalyn Murray O'Hair. That was nice. Dominic Florio, would you like to come up and say a few words?
Well, it's a pleasure to see so many old friends here this evening. I expect to look over and see the Murray O'Hair sitting and taking part in this with us. I first met the Murray O'Hairs in 1976. It was 25 years ago. I was 16 years old. A year before that, I had heard Madalyn on a late-night radio program, and my mother told me to turn it on and listen. She said, "You have to listen to Madalyn Murray O'Hair. I used to listen to her when you were a child in a crib, and you sound just like her. You have to listen to her." And I listened to her, and I ordered her book, Freedom Under Siege. And a year later, at 16 years old, they were having a convention in New York City. And my parents drove me to the convention. And there I was, a 16-year-old wide-eyed kid, sitting there and just taking everything in. And Madalyn walked up to me, and she said, "Where's your name tag?" And I said, "Well, they didn't give me one." She said, "Well, I'll tweeze their balls." And that was my first introduction to Madalyn Murray O'Hair. Through the years, our relationship became one of not only colleagues, but they were my atheist family. They enabled me to meet so many people, see so many things, and learn so many things. In the 80s, Don Sanders and I formed, with the help of the Murray O'Hairs, American Gay Atheists. And I was very proud of our long association and our work together. I also hosted Equal Time for Atheism on Pacifica Radio Show for 2 years in New York City. And because of that, I was awarded with Atheist of the Year for my work in the media. And I have that on my wall still today, because I'm proud of my association with the Murray O'Hairs and this organization. Watching Madalyn up there speaking, I always remember that twinkle in her eye. And as I was watching the tape and watching various people and sometimes making little cynical comment to my sister. I could envision Madalyn looking and squinting her eyes and cocking her head to try to hear what I was saying, because she always wanted to be in on it also. And there was one thing about the Murray O'Hairs, they were homey. They were regular folk. John or Madalyn would approach me and say, "Florio, I have to tell you something. This is a strict confidence. Don't tell anyone." And 2 days later, they'd be announcing it before the convention, whatever that was that they had told me. They never minced words. As we just heard, honesty was upmost in everything that they did. They told it as it was, as it is. And the stories can go on and on about them, but I don't want to take up all your time with various stories about them, but I will say that they don't live on in our hearts, because the hearts just pump blood, but in our brains. My experiences are invaluable to me, and they've helped make me who I am, my long association with them, and the way to keep their memories alive is to carry on their work, what they started. And I don't care what organizations are out there, what individuals do, who speaks, who goes to court, who fights, for what cause, for the advancement of human beings, of atheism, of separation of church and state. The Murray O'Hairs were people that were the strength behind it all. And they gave us that backbone to carry on today. So please do that, carry on in their name. Thank you.
Okay. I'd like to read another letter from a gentleman named Brandon Walker, who sent this to us, and he sent it because he's 91 and he couldn't be here. Most of what I can say of the Murray O'Hairs is from reading their articles, etc., in the Atheist magazine. I developed a great respect and love and appreciation for that tireless and dedicated trio. Their work was mountainous and continually mounting. I began to fear a final breakdown for them, but somehow they managed to keep going. I can't see how they managed to do the work they were doing and not just pass out into sleep. And then the tragedy. I am not good at expressing myself, as are others, but to me, they were a great combination of great personalities, champions of humanity, champions of the rights of animal kind, that great variety of relatives to humankind. The fruits of these great and fine personalities are embodied in American atheists and in world atheism as their legacy. And thank you, Ellen, for your interest that granted me this communication. Appreciatively, Brandon Walker. Well, we thank Mr. Walker for that. I would like to invite Frank Zindler to come on up and say a few words.
I'm not sure what year it was, but it was early in the 1980s that my wife Ann and I were for the first time invited into the home of the Murray O'Hair family. One of the first things that I noticed in their beautiful home was a little spinet piano. It was really, compared to the rest of the furniture, it was nowhere near as elegant or anything. It was just a well-worn spinet piano. And I asked Madalyn if I could try it out. And she said yes. Well, unfortunately, I have a terrible time remembering music. I can't even remember my own compositions. I have to play them with the score in front of me. So I asked Madalyn if she had some music. And she says, yeah, it's in the piano bench. And I opened the piano bench, and the first thing that I saw was the old yellow Schirmer edition of the Chopin Etudes. And I took that out, and I started just looking through it.
And immediately I came upon the etude, which is known as the Revolutionary Etude. And it was just worn almost out. There were annotations, fingering notations, and so on. And just you could tell that the pages themselves had been turned thousands of times, probably. Well, this was an etude that I myself had practiced many, many, many times and never could play correctly. And I asked Madalyn, I said, Madalyn, this is really worn. Who was playing this? And she said, well, I was playing. And I said, oh my goodness, I had no idea that you played the piano, let alone that you could play something like this. And I asked her if she would play that for me. And she told me basically the same thing that she had told Noel, except she told me that the good Christians who had broken her wrist were none other than the 16 police officers who had beaten her up after they invaded her home in Baltimore, and that had ended her piano playing career. I don't know, of course, how well Madalyn ever played that. From the sheer number of times that those pages had been turned, I suspect she never played it a lot better than I did, but I don't really know. But the symbolism of it was not lost on me. This is a composition which is just fraught with turmoil. And I think it really reflected Madalyn's life. I want to play a recording of this. I wouldn't attempt to try to play it myself. I'm hoping that with this little boombox, I'm not going to get some horrific feedback, but I would like to just play this. It only takes 2.5 minutes, but it's 25 years of work in it. But let's see if we can hear this. Well, I think you appreciate the symbolism of that piece from your response. I just want to say that that piano was not there when the IRS confiscated their house. That piano was one of the treasures that Madalyn sold in order to have money to pay some lawyers' fees for some very important cases that were current at that time. So that was the final movement of that piece. I have devoted this spring issue of the American Atheist magazine to the Murray O'Hair family. It's the Murray O'Hair commemorative issue. I had debated what to say tonight beyond the music, which instantly appeared to me to be something that I wanted to do. And I thought I would ad-lib something, and then I got cold feet, and I decided that what I would do tonight would be to read the in memoriam, which is in place of my normal editorial in this particular issue of the magazine. I hope you will forgive me reading instead of speaking directly to you, but I don't trust myself to try to wing this. By the way, as Noel said, Madalyn's birthday is tomorrow. She would be 82 years old tomorrow. In memoriam, Madalyn Murray O'Hair, April 13th, 1919 to September 1995. Jon Garth Murray, November 16th, 1954 to September 1995. Robin Murray O'Hair, February 24th, 1965 to September 1995. How can one find words to express the enormity of the tragedy that has been visited upon the atheist community? How can insentient sound waves, mere pressure changes in the air, bespeak the sharp-edged prick of pain, the throbbing ache of grief, the dull and numbing sense of emptiness felt by those of us who were close comrades of Madalyn Murray O'Hair, Jon Garth Murray, and Robin Eileen Murray O'Hair. It is now more than 5 years since the first family of atheism disappeared from their home in Austin, Texas, and at least 4 years since most of us drew the intellectual inference that some awful fate had befallen them. It is over a year since we learned with near certainty that they had been kidnapped, extorted, perhaps tortured, brutally murdered, dismembered, and buried ignominiously in a wild and windswept grave on a ranch outside San Antonio. Even so, the passage of time has been insufficient to strengthen us to withstand the emotional implosion triggered by the recent discovery of their charred remains. None of the intellectual analyses of the past year could steel our nerves to the terrible reality that 3 brilliant minds have been extinguished forever. 3 courageous hearts shall never beat again, and 3 comrades whom we loved and admired shall never again visit our homes, offer us encouragement in times of self-doubt, or stir us to action in imitation of their tireless toil. Nor could the passage of time really prepare us for the emotional reality that we now are on our own in the fight against superstition and religious encroachment both upon the governmental domain and upon the private sphere of conscience. Never again shall we have their animating leadership, their astute advice, or the example of their often valiant deeds. We really are on our own now. It is up to us to continue the struggle against the forces that seek to enslave the American mind, abolish the progress achieved by science, and return us to the dark ages of faith. Murders, especially the violent and brutal sort, are the type of thing one sees in movies or on television, the kind of thing one glances at on the teasing covers of supermarket tabloids. Murders do not touch our lives, but to the contrary, murder has struck down 3 human beings who, for some of us, were practically family. We yearn to know what their final hours were like, yet dread to discover the truth. We struggle to comprehend how lives so filled with promise and achievement should be snuffed out like candles in a sudden draft. How persons who have done so much to liberate the minds and elevate the aspirations of their fellows should come so startlingly and senselessly to naught. The incomprehensible injustice of these deaths shall haunt the innermost reaches and recesses of our minds like a ghost no exorcist can expel. Greater even than the dream of Martin Luther King were the dreams of the Murray O'Hairs. Their dreams incorporated all of the laudable goals of Dr. King, but amplified and extended them to all of humanity. Beyond that, they had a dream that no individual life should ever again be placed in jeopardy by the reality-testing failure known as religion. Nor should the survival of our species be endangered by deluded minds pursuing a cosmic will-o'-the-wisp. No one ever again should be forced to surrender mentally to the slavery of supernaturalism. No one ever again should be forced to pay taxes to support an invisible kingdom known only by the say-so of its parasitic ambassadors, the clergy. Never again should humankind be thrust into the dark ages. Never again should faith vanquish reason and knowledge. They dreamed that the divisiveness and hatred fomented by religions would be overcome by rational minds, no longer willing to do evil when given the command, "Thus saith the Lord." They dreamed that all of humanity, if they could but shed the darkling lenses and blinders of theology, would see more clearly the path of enlightened self-interest and would realize that peaceful cooperation is more desirable than warfare and strife. They held the hope that humanity would realize before it was too late that they are one with nature, brothers and sisters of the humblest animals, and fellow travelers with them on this spaceship we call Earth. Such were the dreams of the Murray O'Hair family, and such are the dreams of those of us who honor them by carrying on their work. The world is a measurably better place because they lived, And America honors the First Amendment of its Constitution ever so slightly more because they fought in its defense. The immortality of Madalyn, Jon, and Robin is not that of liberated souls that naked on the air of heaven ride, but rather it is the immortality of perishable mortals who, departing, leave behind us footprints on the sands of time. For more than that, they never hoped. For all of that, we pay them tribute. For all of that, we honor their memory and resolve that the death of their bodies shall not mark the death of their dreams. We who carry on shall dream the dreams that they no longer can dream. Thank you.
I'd like to invite Paul Marcer to come up and say a few words.
Well, Larry King was born an atheist, and so was the other person who was up there. Like we all were born atheists. I was born an atheist. We're all born atheists. And I fortunately continued my atheism through my life. And I instilled these wild ideas on my children, Alan, John, and Robert, two of whom are with us this evening, who referred to Madalyn as Aunt Madalyn. So we were very close through the years. And many years ago when I was a teenager, my cousin Arnold, who worked for the New York Times for many years, said that I was an atheist. And I replied, "What is an atheist?" And I was delighted to know that there was a definition of who and what I was and what I thought. It delighted me. And then in 1973, I was listening to Long John Nebel and Candy Jones on WOR in New York. I'm sure there are people in this audience who are familiar with that couple. And I was mesmerized by the evening because they had four clergy persons and an atheist called Madalyn O'Hair. This is great. Well, I had to go to work the next day. I think I was making $52.50 a week at that time. But I stayed up all night to listen to Madalyn, and she absolutely destroyed the clergy using their own weapons of the Bible. There was two Jesuit priests, a minister, a Jewish rabbi, and she absolutely cut them up, destroyed them, and spit them out throughout the night. I was so delighted. At the end of the show, they had a short announcement of her address in Austin, Texas. I immediately wrote. And then in April of 1974, it was April 12, 13, and 14, so the dates have stayed the same for all these conventions since 1974, which was the first convention that took place in Orlando, Florida. It was held at the Horn Motel. Where that is today, if it exists, I don't know, but that's when I first met Madalyn. And our relationship was steadfast through the years. Madalyn O'Hair was a delightful person. She was the most intellectual person I've ever met in my life. I learned a lot from her through my life. I met a lot of people, traveling with her, having dinner with her, through Texas, through New York, through Florida. I met many people, including Butterfly McQueen, who some of you would probably know as a person who played in Gone with the Wind. She was a delightful lady. She died just a couple of years ago, tragically in a fire. But I met many people with Madalyn in our travels, and she asked me at that time to form the New Jersey chapter of American Atheists, which I did. We went on to sue the town of Metuchen for starting their council meeting with a prayer, and we went on successfully through the years. She was a delightful person. Many people don't realize how funny she was. She was amusing, charming, funny, articulate, and the most brilliant woman I have ever, most brilliant person, bar none, I have ever experienced in my life. And I think Winston Churchill said it best when he said that so many owe so much to so few. And this was very true in the O'Hair family, particularly Madalyn. I knew Jon, of course, very well, and Robin, and I even knew Bill Murray in the early days. I could say a lot about him, but this is not about him. I just want to conclude by saying that that she was a very unique person. And I'm a great Sinatra fan, and I have often said there'll never be another Sinatra. There won't be, and there will never, ever be another Madalyn O'Hair. She was fabulous. I miss her dearly, and I loved her. Thank you.
Paul is a dear friend of mine. We're both from New Jersey. He started with American Atheists in the early 1970s. He co-founded the New Jersey chapter of American Atheists. I met Madalyn Murray O'Hair for the first time, and Jon Murray at, I don't know what they were doing in New Jersey, but you said to me, do you want to meet Madalyn Murray O'Hair? So I went down there, and I'll never forget. She walked in, what was it, 1979 or something, and it was like seeing a movie star. I was speechless. I said, I'm so nervous, but she was wonderful, and I met her at Paul Mars's house. I'd like to read another. Is Betty Williams here? I guess not. She wrote and said she would try and make it, but she wrote something in case she couldn't make it. Dear Ellen, I really hope you get to read this. I feel I was as close as you could get to Dr. O'Hair and Jon and Robin. I spent many, many hours donating time to acknowledging and placing donated books into the Atheist Library there in Austin. I played with their little dogs and had many friendly talks with Madalyn, Jon, and Robin. One of their trusted hired workers boarded with me. David, she left it blank, I'm guessing it was David Travis. We always thought Madalyn seemed to distrust those of us who loved her and trusted those we were doubtful of. However, we didn't have the guts just to go and tell her. We knew with the dozens of hate letters she received every day that she never could truly trust anyone. When I first heard of their disappearance, I knew it was really bad, as they never left those two little dogs. Breakfast, sure, medicines, maybe, dogs, never. Many, many times I dropped by the headquarters just to donate an hour or two to help collate a magazine or work in the library, only to suddenly realize I was there for 6 or 8 hours. How the time flew. I realized how late it was, maybe 8 or 9 at night, only to find out that all of them, Dr. O'Hair, Jon, and Robin, were still busy working on something. They were without a doubt the most dedicated people I had ever met. These were not partying, big-time spenders. When I first started donating time to the American Atheist Center, I guess she means, back in 1980, they were open 7 days a week, 12 to 14 hours a day. These were not people trying to live off donations of the stupid. When I could afford it, I attended the atheist conventions. What a bunch of dedicated, intelligent people. One time in my life, I usually keep my mouth shut and learn. I loved the one in San Diego around 1989 or 90. My memory of that date not too good, but loved the convention. Then I moved here just a month before their disappearance and have felt so much sadness. What a waste of all that intellect, dedication, and love of this country. I really want to and plan on attending the convention in April. Hope to see you there and meet you. Also, Dr. O'Hair and I have the same birthday, April 13th. She was my birthday older sister, and we could celebrate together. Thank you for reading this rambling. I have my pins and membership cards, which I shall renew at the convention this year if I am lucky enough to get to come. And that was Betty Williams from Texas. Thank you. Conrad Geringer, are you in the room? Would you come up and say a few words?
It's said that events like this are not for the dead, but for the living. So in that spirit, I want to just say a few things about the Murray O'Hairs. I think there are a lot of lessons to be learned in how these people lived, how they died, and the journey that all of us take together. Not everyone liked Madalyn Murray O'Hair, or the rest of the family for that matter. Some worshipped her. It was a dubious gift of nature that Madalyn especially had that rare quality of temperament in bringing forth from others the extremes of human feeling. The strength that sustained her through nearly 4 decades of philosophical and political activism, not only as a social rebel, but as a woman who was fighting to be heard, brought